Welcome to the Board of Selectmen's meeting for Tuesday, June 7th, 2016. Reminder too that this meeting is being recorded. But before we begin our meeting, we'd like to take a moment of appreciation for our brave servicemen and servicewomen who are serving us around the world. Thank you. We've got another packed agenda tonight. We've got appointments at 7, 7:15, 7:30, and 7:45. And then we've also got quite a number of other things to kind of fill in between our appointments. So first up on the agenda at 7 o'clock here, we have a special election that needs to take place jointly between the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Assessors. We need to vote to elect a candidate to fill a vacancy in our Board of Assessors. So what do we need to do, Mr. Sullivan?
You need to call the election to order and open the floor for nominations. And nominations are closed. You close the nominations and call for the election. It has to be by roll call. Okay. So usually designate the clerk.
Sounds good. All right. Okay.
Declare the election over, assuming it's not a tie.
And we've got hundreds of people here all fighting for the one position. Well, I guess, Pete, would you like to, start the roll call, and get this? No, should I call?
You have to ask the nominations, and typically you would defer to the board that has the vacancy as to whether they have a nomination in mind.
All right. I guess I'll defer then to the Board of Assessors. Mr. Sweeney, I believe, is the chairman this year. Okay. And
we have a person who's qualified.
Okay.
For the position. Just scary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Excellent. Okay. Excellent. Okay. I guess you need a second for that and stuff for that. No. Okay. All right. Excellent. All right. I guess we'll. Okay. It's all. All right. So I guess I'll make a motion here to close that nomination.
We each have to do it. The two separate. Yeah. You have a combined meeting of the two boards.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And Pete, you want to? Yeah.
So we close the nominations then. I'll take, as the clerk of the Board of Selectmen, I'll call the roll. Mr. Sweeney? Who are you voting for?
Oh, okay, good. Yeah.
Mr. Perry? Mr. Marcucci?
Mr. Scary.
Mr. Scary.
And me too.
Okay, excellent.
Congratulations and thank you for volunteering.
Excellent. Excellent.
You'll need to be sworn in by the town clerk, then you're stuck. Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations. Thank you for offering to serve. Appreciate it.
Thank you
very much. And good luck. Good. Excellent. Good. All right. And I guess that's it. I guess we'll just make a motion to close the election, or we're done. Yeah.
No, that's it.
Okay.
Yeah, you've done everything you have to do.
All right. That was it. Good. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank
that
you.
was quick, huh? Great. Thanks. We've got an appointment at 7:15 with the committee to discuss the youth overreach program. Maybe we'll wait a few minutes or so. The chief's here. Don's here. I don't know. Don, who else might be coming? Do you know from? Not sure. Okay.
You do need to wait.
Do we have to wait?
Yeah,
for
the agenda. So.
All right. We'll wait for that. Okay. All right. So in the meantime, we'll take a look at some of our pending items on the agenda. First up is that we were going to look at tonight to look at our committee and commission appointments, chatting with Christine and everyone today. She would like to have us postpone it until our next meeting so that we have an opportunity to kind of just review one more draft of the appointments and stuff and take care of that at our June 21st meeting.
Could I ask that we do one thing between now and the next time when we consider this, sure, which is to ask each of the committee chairs to poll their committees to find out if people are interested in continuing on.
Excellent. Okay, good. All right, so we'll hold off then until June.
On everything?
On the
reappointments?
Yeah, the reappointments.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we can do the master planning committee tonight?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
Yeah, that'd be great. All right. All right, so let's talk about the master plan committee for appointments for that. Let's see, we've got some letters of interest in, I believe, from 3 individuals. We got Mike Quinlan, Peggy Sue Werthessen, and Robert Herbstuber, I guess it is. Yep.
2 of them were here.
Okay. Oh,
as
good.
well.
All right. We've got, and you are Robert. And Peggy Sue. Peggy Sue. Excellent. Thanks for coming. Excellent. Great. Thank you. Very nice resumes. Great backgrounds. Thank you very much. And I know we've gotten a letter too that the warrant committee has nominated Tom Marie also as their representative. So I think the last thing will be the planning board, which is going to come up, I guess, at their June meeting, right? That they'll appoint a member for that. So I guess any discussion amongst us as far as how we feel about that stuff, the folks. Yeah.
I mean, in case the planning board asks, do you care whether it's a member of the planning board or whether it's someone that they designate?
I don't care.
I don't care.
Either way would be fine. Okay, we gotta work
No. Yeah, I think that'd be great. Good and stuff like that.
So I thought that the 3 applicants that we had were highly qualified applicants, and so I would move to appoint all 3 of them.
I would second that.
Okay.
It's your last chance to back out, Robert and Peggy Sue.
But at least you got a short time frame,
Right.
which is good. Thank
Right.
God Mike
That's right.
wrote that in, so you know what I mean? So you're not stuck forever. Okay. All in favor of those appointments?
Aye.
Aye.
Yep.
Excellent. Good.
So could I bring up
Congratulations. Yeah.
one other thing about the master planning committee, which is that when we were talking about it the last time, Teresa James mentioned about whether or not we should include the planning board more in the process. I talked to her again last night about that, and that strikes me as a very good idea. And I just hadn't thought of that before we adopted that format that we adopted. So I was going to suggest that maybe the way to get the planning board more involved is to have them manage it instead of having the selectmen manage it. Instead of having the committee report to the selectmen at these different times that you set up, Mike, that we just have them report to the planning board basically, and have the planning board manage it for us basically.
Well, I mean, I guess my concern with that, I have no problem with that. I mean, I don't want to give them more appointments to make, but there's more issues in the master plan than are covered by things within the purview of the planning board. And the planning board certainly has a lot on their plate right now. So I don't think I'd want to absent ourselves from the process. I mean, I think if they would like to they're going to have a representative on the committee, and I think they're certainly welcome to have either to come at the same time to discuss with them. I'd be hesitant to sort of get ourselves out of it.
I actually wasn't going to remove ourselves because I think ultimately it has to come back to us.
Yeah.
But in the interim of managing the steps, I was thinking that they could do it instead of us.
Do they want to do it?
I don't know.
Technically, it's their statutory jurisdiction.
Right. They have to vote yea or nay on the master plan.
Yeah, I emailed Wright today and asked him if the planning board would be interested, and mentioned that I would mention it to you guys, but I haven't heard back from him, so I have no clue.
Well, maybe the committee can meet now that they have at least 4 members, and if the planning board picks somebody for the 5th, and then maybe check back in, and once we hear from the planning board about what they want to do. I mean, I'm perfectly happy to have them do it, and I don't want to overburden the steering committee with additional reports to make. But I'm also mindful of the planning board's time and the other work they have to do, and making sure that the other aspects of the master plan beyond the planning and zoning, which is probably going to be a smaller part of this process, given that there's not that much undeveloped land in town to be rezoned or what have you. I would want to make sure that we're involved as we go along to make sure that some of the other issues that are kind of outside of the planning and zoning piece of it are considered in the process. And so I think we can do it either way. We can sort of have us do it together, have the planning board do it, what have you. But maybe we'll hear back from
As
them
a first
to see if
step,
they
we
want
should
to
see
do
whether
it.
they're interested. If they're not interested, then that's all.
Right.
So,
Yeah. So
the other thing that we might consider doing is just suggesting somebody to call the first meeting. And I might suggest that Mike Quinlan call the first meeting.
sure, that's fine.
Yeah, where he's got the most experience with, with town.
With
boards
meetings,
and stuff,
right.
meetings and stuff like that, so that'd be great. Good.
So I will let him know.
Let him know, yeah. So, good luck.
Thank you.
Very much. Thanks for serving. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks. All right, good. We've got a few more minutes, and I guess next up is that we've got the Senior Housing Study Committee. And I know we have a few resumes in, and so I guess we've got to figure out where we're at in the process, and we really haven't given it too much thought recently as far as where we're going with that and stuff, and size and things like that. So Pete, I don't know, Pete, Mike, some of your thoughts on where we're at with that and stuff? I don't know. Yeah.
This is on housing.
Yeah. Senior Housing Study
Senior
Committee.
housing.
Senior
Yeah.
housing. I noticed Roberta's here.
Yeah.
I don't know whether she has any suggestions for it, but I know one of the things we talked about was we wanted to have people with skills to bring to the table rather than necessarily people who are interested in single housing. Now, if you could find somebody with a combination of both,
Yeah.
that would be fine. But
Yeah.
we wanted people who had backgrounds in building or architecture or finance or banking,
Yep.
something that would make a positive contribution to the study itself.
Study itself. Yeah.
So I think the applications we've received, I believe four
I
applications
think we've
so
got,
far,
including you.
including Roberta.
Yeah.
And then the other three were seniors
Yeah. And so, yep.
residents.
Has Roberta applied as well?
Yeah, she
Oh,
has.
okay.
Yes, yeah. What we have done frequently in the past is if someone is an employee of the town, you will put them on as ex officio
Sure.
Yeah.
voting member
Sure.
rather than have them as a
Yep.
voting member. So that might be a way to do it also.
Okay.
And she could do the legwork for them.
Yeah. Which would help with that. So, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm wondering whether we should wait just a touch and see if we put another call out to see if we'll get any more volunteers to try to get this committee up a little bit bigger. I mean, we've only got 4 folks so far, and
I think
trying
at
to
one
think.
point we might have to go shake the hustings because people that might have the necessary skills might not necessarily think of themselves
yeah,
as being appointed to a committee like this. So it may be that if you know of people who would like to serve the town but just haven't necessarily figured a way to do it, and you could approach them and suggest that this might be a helpful, particularly where it's probably a short-term committee, you know.
Yep. Okay. All right, so maybe we should just give it a little bit more time there to percolate, but we do at least have 4 good, solid people anyways, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
My question, how do you get the word out that you're actively searching that?
Well, we have this guy in the front row for one.
Yeah. We're going to have it in the newspaper. We'll have a little note in the newspaper, which would be good, yeah. Yeah, and then if you can pass the word around too, I think, Roberta, I think that'd be
Put it
great.
on the website and the blogs will
I
pick
think
it
it'd be
up.
good, just to get a little more out, yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, it'd be
And
good.
Sometimes the selectmen will know of someone who might have the suitable background that they would ask to serve.
Okay.
Sometimes it's the person who doesn't have a vested interest in it who can make the most contributions because they don't have a particular axe to grind or a point of view that they bring to the table. So
All right.
I think we should appoint someone who's always here, like Mr. Massaro.
What?
I thought usually when you missed a meeting, you got put on the committee.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll put Bill in another committee. That'll be good. Excellent. All right.
He's actually not on many committees.
Yeah, well, he's there all the time, yeah. All righty. So I think that's what we'll do then. We'll just give a little bit more time. We'll try to get the word out in Berta too, if you can see anyone that's interested, see if we can get a few more letters and resumes. I think that'd be great. See if we can try to build up, get a good core there. I think that'll be great. All right. It's 7:15. We're here to discuss a committee that is looking to be formed to oversee the youth outreach program. And I know the police chief is here. Don Alcott's here. And anyone want to use? Yep.
Something,
Yep.
just kind of set it up a little bit.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yep, sure.
Great.
well, why don't we just go through the introduction?
Yeah, oh yeah, sure, that'd be great, thank you. Yeah, let us know who's here from your committee, yeah. it sounds-
Okay,
sure.
I'm not sure. I see Jen from the Board of Health.
Okay,
And
Jen, how are you?
Thank you for coming.
There's Chelsea
Yeah.
from Medfield Youth Outreach,
Chelsea.
and Chief.
Yeah, we got
I'm
the
not
chief.
sure,
Okay,
you
good.
know, if anyone else is
No,
coming
that's it.
tonight.
Okay, good, good.
But thank you all for considering this important objective of an advisory board for Medfield Youth Outreach. As you know, Medfield Youth Outreach serves ages 0 to 18 and families. We provide information and referral, counseling, prevention services, education, and connection to multiple federal and state social service programs. As licensed professional social workers who staff this office, we utilize consultation from clinical and prevention experts. We attend professional development seminars throughout the year and are contributing members of many area mental health and substance misuse coalitions so that we can stay abreast of current trends, issues, treatment, and prevention practices. As you know, over the past decade, society has experienced unprecedented shifts in technology and culture that have changed the way youth communicate, placing more demands on families than ever. Studies indicate that youth are feeling more stress than in past years and have less ability to cope with that stress. Since we provide such a broad scope of services and support to families, it is essential that we maintain a broad network of professional contacts within the community who can provide input, support, and challenge to our growth as a department. Developing an advisory board to Medfield Youth Outreach would formalize this process and would unify, build, and further enrich the services. An advisory board could also enhance the lives of Medfield youth and families by defining which programs and services are best tasked to meet youth needs. An advisory board is a timely endeavor to assist Medfield Youth Outreach keep pace with an ever-changing environment and body of knowledge. Advisory boards are not new to the history of Medfield Youth Outreach and have been an integral part of the growth and development of the department over the years. A selectman-appointed board would provide the legitimacy that would help it endure. In preparation for this evening, in addition to reviewing documents on the history of past Medfield Youth Outreach advisory boards, we researched 20 existing municipal mental health department boards throughout the state. A questionnaire was presented to 12 youth and family service departments that reflected similar demographics and service delivery about their board's function. 7 replied. And there's an accompanying document that has all that information. And we built a proposed advisory board off that structure. And so I certainly don't believe every single one of these. I wrote some or all of the following because that's what was reflected in what we
Got back
saw, from town to town. So I'm not thinking we'll have a 20-member board. Certainly not. But a minimum of 7 would be very useful.
Yeah.
In the past, the last advisory board we had disbanded in 2002.
2002.
And it was a 5-member board at that time. And what we experienced is that we were fortunate if we got 2 members there. And then it gradually just dissipated. So we're hoping for a board targeting 7 members if possible.
Okay.
Give me a minute to look back.
Yeah, this is really well thought out. This is really, really nice. I mean, I really like the way you've got the different categories there as far as, and trying to hit all the different areas and the different expertise.
If I could give you a little background too, this kind of goes back several months. I know I met with the Board of Health, and traditionally this outreach program has been under the jurisdiction of the Board of Health.
Yep.
At the time I met with the Board of Health, they felt that the nature of the program was such that they didn't feel they were best suited. They felt that their interest and backgrounds are more along the medical than along the social work area. So they felt that some sort of an advisory board would be better suited to deal with the issues that the outreach program deals with. When I discussed it with Dawn and I don't know, it was Chelsea, yeah, I guess you were on board then. We talked about how it should be representative of the groups in the town government that are dealing with this.
Yep.
In a similar vein, for example, I believe the school's just hired a school adjustment counselor, a social worker. We have the police department that just deals with a lot of the court-related issues. you know, there are a lot of private groups in town that deal with these, but I found that when you get a committee too big, it can't seem to get its act together. It doesn't, has trouble getting quorums. It really tends to dissolve after a while or get down to a core group of people who are truly committed to the program. I think we have to consider some of the factors, and probably one of the things you need to do is develop a mission statement to define what we anticipate outreach program to be. I think there are different opinions as to what outreach should be. For example, I noticed there was some talk about involving the Council on Aging in the outreach program, and I don't know.
My reasoning for that is, I know that could be a little confusing. Like, what does aging have to do? We deal with sandwich generation families very often, where there are families caring for elders as well as their children. And we collaborate on a number of cases in those situations and have over the years. And we end sort of where the Council on Aging picks up. You know, like they serve adults age 50 and over. And oftentimes the folks in the community that come to us that might not fit that category, that might be in the 30s and 40s, we also do the federal fuel assistance program, and we're mandated to serve the whole town for that. So it's not as though we can say, well, you don't fit our criteria, we can't do your application with you. That's not unlike at all any of the other youth and family services departments that we investigated. That's very consistent, that they also get a tiny bit into adult services here and there, but the majority of our caseload has always been youth and always will be youth and families.
Well, and that's what I think you have to define what your expectations are of the outreach program. I mean, it is called the youth outreach program because traditionally it has been involved with youth, and
historically that wasn't always true. The youth outreach worker, when in the 1970s, when she started and then all the way through, became the rape crisis counselor for a while when there were programs through Massachusetts police departments, and so she saw the women who had been sexually assaulted, and that had nothing to do with youth and families. It's an interesting, tricky role to be a detached social worker, which means that you're not attached to a broader agency of social services. And so you do get a lot of things put on your plate. But the mission, as I understand it, and it's been to enrich the lives of youth and families in the community. And I think you do that sometimes by loving the rest of the community well, too. But you don't do it all, you know. And so, on those rare occasions where you get someone who's in need, you meet those needs and you transition them onto an appropriate service to take them the rest of the way.
Well, and I think, too, we have to remember we are a town with limited resources and limited scope of services that we want to provide. And I think we have to also consider that. And for example, we have expanded in the elder area to a respite care program that keeps wanting to get larger and larger because of the demand for services. We have the opioid crisis that has come to the fore that deals with a lot of the law enforcement issues that are getting involved. You've got school issues that are coming in frequently, and we can't be all things to all people, and I think we have to decide what as a town we want to get involved with and what is beyond our scope as a town to deal with before we go too far down the road and end up trying to be all things to all people. We have a veteran service program, we have a senior program, we have a school program, we have a recreation program. How far do we want the youth outreach program to be involved? I know it frequently involves families, but as I said, you can only do so much, and I think we have to focus on.
And I don't want to waste our time tonight worrying about us, seeing a broad scope of adults. I think very much what we do is 0 to 18 and their families and providing those resources. And the name is tricky of Medfield Youth Outreach. It was originally a street outreach worker, but essentially what it is Youth and Family Services. And you look at any of those departments across the state, they all started with that outreach title, and somewhere after the 70s, they dropped that and changed to Youth and Family Services. And when I've suggested that in this community, there's such a brand name that folks hadn't wanted me to change it. So but in essence, that's what we are. We're a youth and family service agency.
Perhaps we ought to hear from some of the other departments that are represented here tonight. Jen?
Hi, Jen Polinsky, 12 Scott Road or Street, depending on who you ask, Board of Health. So I've been a Board of Health member for about 2.5 years and had the opportunity to see Medfield Youth Outreach over those 2.5 years. Our feeling on the present board was that given our broader mandate to look at public health, everything from septic systems to sewer drainage to mosquitoes, ticks, et cetera, as well as mental health, that we were not able to provide this ongoing support and knowledge that the Medfield Youth Outreach would need to thrive in the community. And we, too, have talked a lot about what the focus and the mission statement of Medfield Youth Outreach should look like going forward as the town changes or does not change. So I would say, on behalf of the board, this is a good opportunity to reevaluate what that mission is and perhaps redefine some pieces where we may or may not have been involved over the decades. Times have changed, Dawn has said that, and the lives of youth in our communities we know are very complicated, and we want to have this support and services for those folks. So.
Sure.
So the relationship that the police department has with youth outreach is very close. I have said, and I continue to say, that I'm less interested in statistics and numbers that I can put on a page of enforcement actions that we've taken, as opposed to fixing as much as we can. I was very pleased when the juvenile age was expanded to 18, because that means we can get a lot of young people out of the high school without criminal records. And I think the relationship that occurs between youth outreach and police is that we're trying to problem solve, sort out what's going on, what's a number of different solutions, or sometimes the solutions are limited by circumstances, but it's an ongoing dialogue that's very healthy and has to occur in order for youth to be supported. And on occasion, Dawn and Chelsea and, predecessors have also found themselves having to be involved with some of the older members of the community. And sometimes that gets very taxing for them and very complex. And, as Dawn has said, most of the work they do is the up to 18. And I think that's an excellent place to focus. But as Dawn has also mentioned, there are other things that she does need to do, such as the federal fuel assistance and whatnot, to be part of that. But I think, focusing on youth and, and you can certainly add families into that, because if there's something going on with a 13-year-old in the four walls of the house, the rest of the family can't just ignore it and pretend like it's not there. It involves the entire family. So the solution is usually not just very simply targeted at the one person. You have to encompass the whole family if you're going to bring some health back inside the four walls of that house or the apartment or the condo or whatever it is. So, but we have an excellent relationship that goes on, and we have for years. If that's helpful.
Yeah.
I think putting aside the question of the advisory board for a minute, it seems like there's a prior question to that, which is sort of where you best fit in within the town government. And is the idea that if you have this advisory board, will you still be technically under the jurisdiction of the Board of Health?
That I wasn't sure of. And I've been told by Michael that yes, that the Board of Health is the governing body because of liability insurance and the need. I've been told that yes, we'd be under the Board of Health, and this advisory board would sort of be sitting between us and the Board of Health somehow. And, we still would report to the Board of Health ultimately because it's a health service. Mental health is a health service. And so that was my understanding. I'm not certain if that's still the case or if that's up for discussion or where that all is, but that was my understanding.
Okay. Because, just if I could finish to follow up with that, it seems like if you look at all of the things that you're doing, and most of my knowledge from what you do comes through your budget that I've reviewed from the warrant committee over the past few years, but it doesn't fit perfectly under the Board of Health with everything the Board of Health is doing. And it would seem like one of the things we ought to discuss and think about is where's the best place for you to be, right? In a bigger town, you would have sort of a Department of Social Services, and there'd be a head of someone of Social Services, and everybody would fit under that department. We're not that big, and we don't need that kind of bureaucracy. But it seems like and this has been a recurring theme in your budget discussions over the past few years as well, that you're a little bit without a home in the rest of the government, in the sense that there's not really that many other people doing exactly what it is that you're doing, and you're sort of on your own. And you sort of have different things that you're supposed to be doing kind of because there's no one else in particular to do them. But I do think we ought to think about that because, it probably from a appearances perspective wouldn't necessarily make sense to put you in the police department, right? But I would imagine that there are some police departments that have someone with something like your role within the police department as sort of a social worker within the police department, right? So that could be one place for you to be, right? Now you'd have to think about what that would mean from the standpoint of, gee, is this someone from the police coming to see us? But I think that's one potential role for you. Another place, obviously, is with the schools, right? Because you're dealing with the youth. Most of the youth are in the schools, or at least under the jurisdiction of the school department one way or the other. The school department is supposed to make sure that they're going to school. That's sort of another place you could be. And I realize there's a history with that, and there's issues with that, and that's not necessarily an easy solution. So I think from a bureaucratic standpoint, we ought to think about where you best ought to be from the long term. I think the advisory committee sounds fine. I think the challenge that you're going to have, as with most committees, is getting people, number one, to want to be on it, and then number two, to want to show up to do it.
Yep.
And I think the biggest thing, I think you've done a good job with this in your discussion, and I've been on advisory boards, and I'm on advisory boards, and one of the problems with advisory boards is that there's nothing specifically for them to do a lot of the time. So whereas a typical fiduciary board, you're reviewing budgets, you're approving things, you're hiring and firing people and that sort of thing. If you're on an advisory board, you really have to have something to do. And I think you've given some thought to that, and I think that's something that you're really going to have to make sure that you have stuff for the folks to do, because eventually they'll lose interest if there's nothing for them to do. But I do think this question of where you should be and who your supervisor should be is a live one and something we've got to think about.
In other
going
communities,
forward.
all the other youth and family service communities, except for Needham, interestingly, has just come under their Board of Health. So they've become part of health services. And they had been their own, there is like a youth board or a youth commission, but most of the other towns are either have a youth commission or a youth advisory board, and it's a separate entity. And I don't know how they manage that. Like we had talked about the insurance issues, Michael, and so I don't know how they manage that. So, the liability insurance costs, I believe, from what Michael told me, are much more expensive if you're not tucked under one of these other departments. But I don't,
Well,
that's
I think you
just,
should be tucked under another department. I think the question is which one. And I think you ought to think about, kind of, you think of all the stuff that you do and what you spend your time on, of those things, which other departments do they have the most to do with, right? Which ones are you most often working with, addressing the same issues? Who are you most often in touch with in terms of the people who have the real needs and the real problems, and where you can be the most helpful to people in the town? That's probably where you ought to be bureaucratically as well, because I mean, the Board of Health, and you deal with like permits, right, for,
little bit of everything.
yeah.
A little bit of,
Right,
yeah,
right.
Lyme
And
disease.
Yeah,
we got
so
Lyme
it's not, I
disease.
mean, it's not necessarily, they're not doing a lot of other social service kind of stuff outside of youth outreach. And so I wonder whether this is something we ought to just think about and talk about going forward to make it easier for you and maximize the effectiveness of what is obviously a small organization.
And we would keep a board busy. I can tell you, there's a lot to do, and the wisdom, the collective wisdom would be so valued and so useful.
If I may, I'm sorry,
Go ahead, please.
If I may speak to your comment,
And I'm not trying to take her away from you. I'm just trying to think from the standpoints of the best way to do this for the town and for Dawn and the whole group.
Right. To your comment, I've thought about this a lot, in that the Board of Health deals with population health, whether it be septic system permits, stormwater drainage, raising the tobacco age to 21. We're not necessarily plugged into individuals, right?
Yep.
It's overarching public health for the town.
Yep.
The strength of Medfield Youth Outreach is that they are very intentionally touching different members of the town. Sure. Certainly mental health falls under larger healthcare, but that's, I think, one of the push-pulls we've had, is that the folks on the board are trained essentially to think more broadly and to think 30,000-foot view. Whereas we need folks who really have that individual level touch. So just my perspective.
So I like your thoughts, Mike, in terms of figuring out how it should be structured and where it should end up. Part of my thinking is that I have seen that we're offering social services in a number of different places. I mean, the police actually offer social services. They interact with people that are mentally ill. They deal with domestic issues, family issues all the time. Recently, I had someone write to me as a selectman about an issue that I knew nothing about, having to do with their health insurance. And so I gave that to the Shine volunteer for the town, who is also our veteran service officer. He solved it for them. It was a very complicated instance, because it was a grandmother with a child that she was raising. And after that, I had the conversation with Ron about the interplay between what he does, what youth outreach does, and I suggested to him, gee, really, there's so many people in town, because Roberta has Cheryl, a social worker, working with her, servicing the elderly. It strikes me that there might be some synergies if we have these people connecting up somehow and working together, and maybe having more of a social service department in the town. And I mentioned that to Ron Griffin, because the veteran service officer would be a perfect candidate to be part of that social service team. And he said that he had actually thought of that idea and had talked to Mike about it with Richard within the past year, I guess, they met with you. To me, that sounds like the sort of thinking that we should be doing as to whether or not there's some opportunities here for that sort of. And one of the things that Ron mentioned is that, I mean, technically we're obligated to have a full-time veteran service officer, because we're over 12,000, unless we can get some people to move out of town.
It's in the budget for next year, right?
And we don't need one, because the veteran service officer doesn't have enough veterans to work with, so that they could there might be some synergies that they could do something else for the other people in town that are working with these issues somehow. So I think it would be good to have some thinking about how the structure could work.
Bedford, Massachusetts, they have a really interesting youth and family services department, and I haven't had a chance to talk in depth yet with their director to figure out how they absorbed different things. But their veteran services officer is in their department, so I don't know how that works, but Sue Balduff would. She's the director there, and their population is a similar amount. It's like 13,000, and she's been a leader in a lot of the municipal, mental health groups that get together. So I haven't had an opportunity to talk to her about how all that changed, but they utilize that veterans officer for the veterans, but then also for a lot of the community needs that come up, like the fuel assistance program, and they dispatch that person to the fuel assistance trainings and then to do the fuel assistance applications as they come up, and those sorts of things. And so they're able to take the needs that are outside of veterans and incorporate veterans, but meet the needs of the general population as well.
Mike, did you say that the full-time veteran service officer is in the budget next year? Yeah, so we need to figure out things for that person to do, probably.
Well, it isn't funded for.
It's not funded for full-time.
Full-time.
Well, it was $66,000, right, next year's budget.
We reduced that.
I thought it was reduced to 66.
Reduced 25,000.
25.
Yeah. The other thing. When I did talk to Ron, our conversation focused more around the Council on Aging social work program, because I think primarily he's dealing with an elderly population and primarily with financial and health issues, as opposed to, you do get into family issues, but it has more to do with the aging.
He told me that he has as many veterans in their 90s and over as he does under 50.
Yes.
So that there are very few veterans in
Yes.
Medfield anymore is the reality.
Yes, and he expects the numbers to continue to decline.
Right. But the requirement, I mean, to be the veteran service officer has to be a veteran, him or herself,
yes,
right? That's
yes,
the state
absolutely,
law on
yes.
that. So I mean, it would certainly make sense that if unless we're able to do a deal with Millis and sort of split that position, which I don't think has really gone too far.
No, they've hired. They're under 12,000, so they're not required to have full time.
I mean, it would certainly make sense to think about that role in connection with the other social services being offered in town, and then figure out where they should be bureaucratically. I mean, in terms of to whom they report and who's going to oversee them from a legal standpoint, and then the advisory board would be in that more on the ground capacity.
The other interesting thing is a lot of the services that and the groups that outreach interacts with are not necessarily town government based or even locally based. I mean, you deal with the district attorney, Norfolk County District Attorney, extensively. You deal with what's the outfit that you were involved with on the board? Riverside. You deal with them on issues.
But we don't meet with them or have
on a regular basis.
Or we might go to their trainings. We might bring like their consultants out from like a trauma service if there's been like a terrible tragedy in the community. We'd have their experts come out and guide through that tragedy, but we don't go to them or that sort of thing.
But and then you deal with the churches are a big component of your interactions. So it is a tricky thing to put together something that represents different purposes, where they're coming from, different age groups, different interests, and get it all together in a relatively small board. Because my experience is the larger the board, the harder it is to keep it as a cohesive unit. The harder it is to get quorums for your meetings, and the harder it is to maintain it. So,
I'm sorry, you done?
No.
So in terms of next steps, I was going to suggest that we ask Medfield Youth Outreach to put together what they think the mission statement should be for this group that Mike was suggesting that we should have, and then maybe Mike could review it and
we could react to that, and will give us a little thought. We can kind of mull this over a little bit and think about how we can make things work better.
You've sort of done that with what you've done already.
Yeah.
Under the purpose, I think that kind of encompasses. Under the purpose, I think that encompasses what we'd like them to sort of, be about, and that not only to provide, advising to us based on the trends that folks are experiencing in the community, because we're not in every pocket of the community living all of that. We get what comes to us, but we don't always get to see all the strengths-based things happening or the healthy things. We just don't. So, we kind of covet that point of view, and we covet, some of the other things that they could bring to us. But to build bridges, and to build bridges between town departments, like to unify, and to guide policy, and to approve the budget and do those sorts of things. the advisory board I started with was very helpful. It was Chief Hurley, it was Pastor Phil Bauman, Mary Patch, but before that Lois Cardell, and then there was the director of pupil services from the town, and there was a member of the Board of Health. And that was the board that just eventually shrunk and dwindled over time because every person tasked on that board was so busy. They had such big roles in the community that they were stretched beyond capacity themselves. And so it became difficult to schedule meetings, to get them there. And so if folks are appointed by these different, so I'm not suggesting that it has to be the leader from every single one of these categories, but maybe somebody they would appoint, somebody that works closely with them, that has an interest in serving the town more. And I think that might help rise some names to people's minds of who they might reach out to, folks that are looking to volunteer. I know volunteers are tricky right now. I'm hearing from all the different helping domains that they're having a hard time holding on to volunteers and keeping them going. So whatever shift is happening out there, it's making it tougher. So I get your point very much that it could be hard to hold a 7-member board, but I would like to try to get that diversity.
This is great. This is perfect.
And I would suggest as well, I think it would probably make sense, to the extent you haven't done so far, but to start trying to recruit committee members who you would suggest to be appointed to this committee, so that I think if you show that kind of interest and you think you've got the people in mind, not just the biography, but the actual people to do it.
And I hesitate, I didn't want to say names tonight to throw anybody under the bus publicly, but also I also wanted it to be as diverse as possible, and folks that are not known to us, because that would enrich us too. To have people completely, as strangers to us. Obviously, some folks will come forward that know us, and then there'll be others that it would be a treat to get to know new people too. Yeah. So
fresh point of view is always helpful.
Very good. That's great. So if you can get started maybe in a couple of those tasks, that'd be great, and we can schedule a follow-up meeting with us. Excellent. And we can keep thinking.
And if you have any suggestions as to how things should integrate in the social service area in the town, because obviously you guys have worked in it in a long time, if you could share those with us, that would be very helpful too.
Okay.
As we think about structures for going forward.
All right. Thank you.
Good.
Thanks very much.
Thanks so much.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for coming in. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll talk soon. Yeah. Next, we've got scheduled a public hearing for solicitation, I guess, in Medfield. Kayleen LaRue on behalf of Mass Save Home Building Products, and we don't see her.
She said she was coming.
Okay, so I think we will pass then. Can't very well ask her any questions if she's not here. So we'll hold off on that. And so I guess we can move on to next, talking about, we've got an appointment 7:45 with the Energy Committee. I know Andrew is here and wanted to maybe talk about some proposed energy reduction plans for some of our buildings and some other things I think Andrew wanted to chat about with us. Yeah.
I'm here to give you gentlemen a update on the progress of our energy reduction plan.
Okay.
This is part of our quest to become designated as a green community.
Yep.
We've completed 4 of the 5 criteria. This is our last one, and we have to establish a 20% reduction over 5 years.
Okay.
We have to establish a plan to do that.
A plan.
Right.
Yes, we
So
establish
once
a plan.
we have the plan,
Then
we qualify.
Then we qualify, correct. Yes.
We don't have to wait 5 years to see if it actually works.
No, we don't have to wait 5 years for that $148,000 that I've been preaching for the last year. So,
since we've already spent it, that's good.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, this plan it involves establishing a baseline annual energy use for the entire town, and then figuring out what we can do and how we can reduce that energy. So the first chart that I have for you is the overall baseline energy use. That number is 59,429 million BTUs, and that's basically a normalized unit of energy that encompasses natural gas, electricity, gasoline, diesel, and heating oil.
So that's the total energy
It's the
use?
total amount of energy used by municipal
Yeah.
buildings and
The year?
vehicles.
For the year?
Correct.
Okay.
For the year
Okay.
in fiscal year 15,
Okay.
which is the year that we're baselining.
Okay.
So from this, you can see, you break it down by building. Medfield High School is the largest consumer, which is pretty obvious, and that actually encompasses 24% of the entire usage in town. It's a big building, so it would make sense that that would be the highest use. Next is Blake Middle School, and then the town garage, which I'll get to in a minute. That's a bit of an anomaly that I'll explain. And interestingly enough, our diesel consumption, our liquid fuel consumption for diesel is one of the highest. It's the fourth highest.
Okay.
And that's going to be the area where I think it's going to be tough to reduce, because the highway department has to plow snow. They have to do their job, and the only way we can reduce that kind of consumption is to encourage conservation or anti-idling measures or something like that, but in a way that we would not have to disrupt their operations.
Right.
So that's sort of a starting point. We would need to start thinking about where we can, how we can start reducing these. So further on down the chart, you can see, getting down towards some of the smaller buildings, the library, the COA, and then transfer station. All those are pretty small in comparison to the larger ones. And this chart basically shows where we really need to focus energy in order to get this 20%.
Just where's the police station on here?
Oh, the police station is not on there because that is now demolished. And I'm actually still trying to figure out a way to, or figure out how to include that in the baseline, because it is going to be a new building, and going from the square footage of the old building to the new building, that's excluded for now. Okay. But I think we will see a pretty good reduction, because that was a very inefficient building, and we're going to a brand new efficient building. So I think we'll be pretty good. So the next page.
Just to follow up on that, are we not allowed to include anything for the baseline in respect of that?
No, I'm actually still trying to figure that part out.
Oh, you're not sure?
Yeah,
That's
the one missing piece of the puzzle that I still have to figure out.
Yeah, because you're taking two different buildings. You're trying to figure how you're gonna.
And there is some guidance on that. You have to take the square footage of the old building compared to the square footage of the new building, and it's like a percentage. It's a little bit of a calculation you got to do. But I think it's going to help us, because we did use, in comparison, for that size of a building, we used a lot of energy. So, and that ties into the next slide, or the next page, which is the energy use index. And what that does is normalize the energy usage for the size of the building.
Okay.
So you look at it. So let's just explain the garage first. That is 157 on the index right here. That's the highest. That is because you think, well, what the heck? It's a new building. Why is this using so much energy?
It's 50% more than the next building.
Correct. So the reason for that is because during the first year, because we were trying to get used to the operation of the building, some of the sequences were off, and we used a lot of natural gas during that time. And so this year we used about 35. So it was I think 50,000 units, 50,000 therms. That was used for natural gas during that baseline year. And this year, we're on track to only use 20,000. So that's a reduction right away of 30,000 therms. So that's going to help us to get towards that reduction of 20%, just by adjusting controls in the building, and just by figuring out how to run a building properly. Exactly. So that's a big chunk right there. So so what I did is I figured out, if we were to take that out, that energy use index would actually be 65. So that would be between Blake and Wheelock. So that was just a huge waste of energy that we had during that first year when we were still trying to figure out things. So
one of the first things the Energy Committee figured out was that the high school HVAC was running the same 7 days a week.
Right.
And it turned out that was a $40,000 savings to the town when they put it on a 5-day-a-week school schedule.
It's pretty amazing, yeah, and that was done before the baseline year, I believe. That was quite a few years ago when that was done. So unfortunately, we can't take advantage of that savings, but just simple things like that, make an adjustment to controls and sequences.
But there are lessons to be learned with the public safety building opening, so that we don't do the same thing when we open the public safety building?
I think so. Yeah. I think we learned from the garage, and we need to establish get training for facility personnel in order to understand how things are run. And if we do that right from the get-go, we'll. I don't think we'll see those same issues. So let's see here. So going back to the energy use index, the national average, well, say for schools, the national average is around a 59.
59
So if
for
you look at
schools.
that, the high school is, high school and all the other schools are pretty, are not as efficient as they could be. So there are definitely ways that we can save.
But that's a national average.
That's a
too.
national
So you
average, right?
can't,
Yeah, I know, I understand that.
Look at
Once
North
I find
Carolina
data
climate,
for
yeah.
this region,
Region
and
will make a
for-
big difference. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's see.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I thought that chart was, it shows exactly, which buildings are being run, are saving the most energy and which are not.
And it makes sense with Dale obviously being very high, the older building that in the FAF Center, right? Obviously,
Absolutely, the
older
FAF Center
buildings.
leaks like a sieve.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
there's plenty of opportunities there, and so that goes into the chart, the Excel chart that is on the last page there. These are some of the measures that I've identified and what the energy savings could be. So I'll just highlight a couple of them. Some of the active ones is the lighting here at Town Hall.
Yep.
Again, I'll point to the LED lights that were retrofitted here. We're also going to retrofit the T8 tubes, tube lights, to be all LEDs, and so we'll realize savings from that. In addition, the Council of Aging, they're going to be hopefully replacing their door this year. Which is going to save a lot of money, I believe, in the wintertime, so that door will close properly. So I mean, these are rough numbers. There's not any, haven't been really any official audit per se, but that is, there's a meeting next week that we have with the utility companies, and they're going to help us with these audits to try to get these down on paper in order to present them to DOER for this plan. But these are basically saying, okay, we can save, maybe 10% per building. And I think 10% can just be done by changing habits in a building, by turning lights off, by adjusting controls and making them run more efficiently. So that's where we're at. So the total savings that we need is about 11,000 MMBTUs, and for this number, we're at 9,000. So that's about 15% of the 20%.
Oh, okay.
So typically towns have identified actual savings by physical projects and gone 15% savings, saying, okay, if we replace this boiler, we can get this kind of savings. Oh, get to 15%. The remainder of the 5% for that plan is going to be more towards encouraging conservation.
Sure.
And propagating that through the 5 years in order to achieve that benchmark goal. So essentially what I want to do tonight is just to give you an update that this is where we are with the plan.
Okay.
I have a draft plan, and then in addition to include some of the calculations for these energy saving measures. The Energy Committee will be meeting on Thursday in order to divvy up and figure out who would like to help identify some of these projects. Definitely the schools are going to be the biggest target.
Yep.
But I do think that averaging a 4% reduction per year can be done, but it's going to take some sacrifices, and it takes some effort on the part of every department in town.
Interesting. So you're still looking at that you can still do some more work with the controls, obviously in the high school, right? Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
Because you're talking about a big,
Mr.
pretty big number
Peterson
there.
at the schools has been struggling with those controls, and there's a lot of savings to be had there. I mean, especially even in the lighting for the auditorium.
Yeah.
He has some of the some heating switches, for individual registers coming on and off at wrong times.
Yeah.
All these things, and it all boils down to the actual building control system.
Yeah.
Once that gets working right, everything else should be okay.
Yep. Yep.
So I think there's a tremendous amount of savings. I mean, I hope that is an accurate number.
Yeah.
It could be higher, it could be lower, but I think bottom line is there's a lot of savings there.
Mhm.
So,
Andrew, could you maybe talk about the water pump stations
Sure.
facility? Because that's like a quarter of the, I was surprised at how big a thing it was.
yeah, well, in comparison to the, so the water pump stations themselves, so that
half the
includes,
usage of the Dale Street School, for instance, or something, or
right,
of the
yeah.
garage.
Let me get to that chart here. Baseline, overall, here we go. So, yeah, water pump stations, that includes well 6,
Yeah.
and all the well stations. I think there's 3 or 4 of those accounts.
Oh,
And
okay.
well 6 is actually the 4th highest electrical consumer in town. You wouldn't think that, but oh my gosh, I mean, this thing's running all the time and pushing water up that hill in order to get to the water tower, I believe.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so it's going a lot. The problem with water and sewer and the treatment plant
Yeah.
is that I believe a lot of the efficiency measures have already been done.
Okay,
So there's
yeah.
not going to be a lot that we can do. The biggest thing is to install variable frequency drives
Yeah.
that adjust the load on the motor based on the flow going through it.
Yeah.
That's all been done.
That's right, because Ken, I know you had done that a while. I remember we was talking about that. Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
that, yeah. Yeah.
All our stations have all been done.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and Ken, the water stations, the pumps and the wells have all been done as well,
remember
along
that.
with sewer.
I
So
forgot about that.
so right there, I mean, you look at it, it's like, well, that's great. But this is what it is,
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right, Ken, the new water tower, because you're pumping water a much shorter distance, and you've got a bigger line you're pumping it through, so you got less friction.
Yeah.
So that should be a big
We'll
help.
see. I
Yeah.
hope so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Direction flow.
And you'll have
Water tower, then you
2
have
towers.
reserve water in the tower, etc.
Yeah, you'll have 2 towers, so you're not worried about always just having to refill 1 tower all the time. You can balance it out better, right?
Yeah.
With 2 towers.
Yeah, that'll be nice.
Right.
So the way to benchmark that, I mean, obviously there's no square footage for that, but it's mainly like a unit of gallons per day or a
Yeah.
flow of gallons. And once I receive that data from the treatment plant,
Yeah.
I'll be sure to figure out where we stand as far as a regional average or benchmark the
Yeah.
treatment plant for that. But my gut feeling is that we're pretty good in that respect.
Yes,
So
yeah.
so the biggest savings that we're going to have to find is
Yeah.
in the buildings and in the vehicles.
Sure. I noticed too, like the Wheelock School seems to be, is the most efficient of the schools.
It is, and it's going to get more efficient because they're putting in new
boilers.
boilers. They're going
Yeah.
from 80% to I think 95 or 96% efficient boilers.
So something about the design or whatever, even with the older boilers, it's still
pretty good.
It's still really good.
Yeah.
I was
They don't make them like they used to, huh?
It's amazing, because they've got
Yeah.
single pane windows there.
Right.
Yeah, isn't it interesting? Yeah.
That is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyway, so that's
Yeah.
that's
That's
the
really
end.
good. I like this.
For this part of it, just to give
Yeah.
you guys an update.
Sure.
And
Love it.
as you guys know, I'll be moving on and moving my family down to Philadelphia. But before I leave, I hope to have this plan in place for you guys to approve, along with the select board. The school committee also has to approve this.
Okay.
And we hope to have the application into DOER by the end of September.
Excellent.
And so that is our timeline going forward.
Excellent.
And we'll be enlisting the help of the Energy Committee is going to be doing that. We'll be working with various departments to help identify these measures.
Super. Excellent.
Okay, so the next there's 2 contracts that I also. I'm sorry. Was there anything else more on this? Move on to the contract.
No? Okay.
Okay, so 2 contracts that I have for you to sign are for design and support services for the solar array at the town garage.
Okay.
Now, the first one is for Solar Design Associates.
Okay.
They will be performing the interconnection application and doing a outline, single line diagram that we can submit to the utility in order to get the process going with them. They will also be doing commissioning of the system to make sure that everything's working once it's constructed. The second one is for New Ecology Incorporated out of Boston, and they will be doing RFP preparation work. We'll be bidding this under Chapter 25A, utilizing under the Green Communities Act. In order to, so 25A allows us to not have to worry about any of the bidding laws or bidding limits that for a renewable energy project. And they will also be doing, be a owner's project rep, overseeing construction once that takes place.
Okay, all right. So we've got a couple of contracts here then, right? So with the first, what's it,
These
first
solar-
contract, yeah.
Solar design.
Yeah, it looks like it's 10,700. It looks like
Yes.
total payment's $10,700, okay.
And that's with Solar Design
So
Associates?
it's Solar Design Associates, yep. So Pete, would you like to make a
I would
motion?
move that we enter into that contract.
Okay, we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Yep.
Okay, and then the other contract we've got is for a total, it looks like 15,100, is that correct? Okay, with the, New Ecology Inc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would move that we enter into that contract as well.
Mr.
Let me
Mark,
just ask one question. If you could just clarify again what New Ecology is going to be doing versus what Solar Design Associates.
Sure.
is gonna be.
New Ecology will be writing the RFP,
Okay.
and they will then also be once they've written it, they'll help us evaluate any of the bids as well.
For the construction companies to actually build
For the,
it.
correct.
That's
Correct.
right.
And
But
then,
Solar Design is going to design it.
No, actually, so this is going to be a little bit. The whole thing is going to be different. This whole project is going to be different than the treatment plant. Instead of doing construction documents that we're going to submit with the RFP, we're going to bid this out as design build.
Okay.
So we're going to leave the design up to the up to the final bidder.
Okay.
And so then what is Solar Design Associates going to do?
So they'll be doing the interconnection application. That's the first thing that has to happen in order to get this project going.
Okay.
Because the utility takes between 40 to 60 days in order to finally get everything approved. They have to look and see what, how the grid is in the surrounding area, make sure that system is going to be
Okay.
fine for that area.
So they'll do, how do you connect the array to the grid?
How they
Solar
do-
Design Associates, New
Exactly.
Ecology will essentially be like your project rep, your construction manager who will help evaluate.
Exactly.
Got it. Thank you.
Good.
Okay.
Good. All right. So, do you have a second?
I have a second.
Excellent, good. No, that's great. Thanks for clarifying. That's good. All in favor?
Yep.
Aye, good. Excellent, good.
Okay.
Oh, we're moving. Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.
Yep.
And the deadline on this project is fairly tight because in order to qualify for the SREC credits, it has to be completed and in operation by January 8th. Now, it should go more quickly, I believe, than the wastewater treatment because it's put on the roof of an existing building.
Yeah, at the treatment plant, we had to do a geotechnical analysis, and there's a lot of different subcontractors for driving the foundations. There's
Yeah.
many different moving parts. It's going to be a much simpler project, and my hope is that we can absolutely get this done in time. So,
Excellent.
And the other solar project, the public safety building,
yes, the public safety building, that will be, that has been, the change order has been submitted in order to construct solar on the roof, and the permanent building committee will be taking that change order up in their meeting in July.
Okay.
So that should be done by the time we take ownership of the building.
Excellent.
All right.
Andrew, can you give them a quick update on the wastewater treatment plant solar?
Oh, yes. So that system is up and running. We had a couple little minor technical issues. One of the inverters was not working, but that was replaced last Friday. It is now working. It's working up to full capacity. We're spinning the meter backwards sometimes when it's really bright. And the first, I believe I sent you the utility. Did I send you, gentlemen, the utility bill? I don't know if I think I may have sent it to the Water and Sewer Board instead. But but we saw about a 10,000 kilowatt hour reduction in just 1 month.
Yeah.
So that was pretty. That's progress being made.
Yeah.
Now, will that count for as part of our 20% reduction?
No, it
of
will
the
not,
plan?
because it's not actually reducing energy consumption. It's just getting our energy from a different place. Yeah, I know. I wish I could, because if we wouldn't have to do anything if we had that thing going,
Yeah.
and that would have counted. So
Yeah.
The wisdom of government.
there you go.
I understand that, but that's all right. Excellent. Thanks very much
Thank
for
you.
the update. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew.
Andrew, before you leave, you said the next meeting you're going to have a couple of additional contracts in case you're not here. Can you tell them what they will be?
Oh yes, I'm sorry. So for the June 21st, I anticipate being here, but if I'm not, they're preventative maintenance contracts.
Oh, okay.
One is for the solar array at the treatment plant.
Yep.
And that will happen once the warranty period, that'll kick in next April, I believe.
Okay.
So once the warranty period expires for that, and that'll be for annual maintenance on the solar plant. The second one is for preventative maintenance on the elevator here at Town Hall and also at the library. And the third is for HVAC maintenance on the rooftop units at the garage and also at the wastewater treatment plant.
Okay. Okay, good.
Okay.
Andrew, could I just ask, before you leave town, if you could maybe think about helping Mike and Chris with the LED streetlights? They wanted to be more comfortable with the maintenance issues going forward.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'll see what I can do as far as trying to figure out what the next step should be for that.
Okay, great.
I mean, my timeline for leaving is a little bit tight.
Yep. Whatever
and
you can do.
I'm doing what I can to focus on these two projects, but I'll see what I can do to try to figure that out for you.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Okay,
Thank you very
thank
much.
you.
Thank you, Andrew.
The preceding was a production of Medfield TV.